everyone. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are in the world. We've got a great webinar lined up for you today, Mapping Financial Services, 5 Ways to Use Spatial Analytics, where we're going to be talking about how you can use geospatial to really supercharge your operations for financial services. Bit of housekeeping before we get started. You'll see we have a chat and we have a Q&A. So if you have any questions at all, please do feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we'll probably get to them at the end of this session. And if you run into any issues with the tech, if you can't hear us, if you can't see us, if you can't see the screen, please do shout in there and we will do what we can to help you. So let's get started. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. Just to introduce ourselves so you know who you're talking to today. My name is Helen McKenzie. I'm a geospatial advocate at CARTO, which means my job is to try and help people see how useful and valuable location can be for their organizations. And with me, I have TBC apparently, but I have Ryan Miller. Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, hi, Ryan Miller. I'm a solutions engineer with CARTO. So basically, work with customers and help them understand how geospatial technology can enable their business processes.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to have to come up with a great nickname around TBC.
Yeah, absolutely.
The brilliant consultant. Next slide, please. So here's what we have in store for us today. So first of all, we are going to talk a little bit about location intelligence for financial services, what that looks like, how you can use it in your sort of day-to-day job, how it can help you solve problems. And then we're going to look a little bit about at CARTO specifically and how our sort of kind of unique approach to spatial analysis can really help you. So if we head on to the next slide, and let's talk a bit about location intelligence for financial services and what that actually means. If we just go on to next slide, please, Ryan.
Sure.
I want to kick off by talking a bit about what value does location actually add for financial services? Where are the impacts that it can have? So first of all, we have cost reduction. So location intelligence can really be helpful in terms of optimizing, automating, and really just driving efficiency for your organization. Then we have revenue growth. So in terms of hyper-targeting, market prioritization, and product localization. Next, we have risk mitigation, so understanding where there might be risks in your operations, in your strategy, and building location into that. And also in terms of compliance, making sure that your organization is compliant in terms of policies, in terms of ESG regulation, that sort of thing. And then we have enhanced customer loyalty. So by doing all of these things, by offering, for example, personalized services, by showing that you really understand your customers, you can really drive customer loyalty. So that's a real overview on the sort of value that location intelligence can add for financial services. What we're going to do now, sort of get away from the slides, we're going to show you some of this in action and show you how you can actually start to see that value by solving some of these problems. So we're going to do a quick dive into 5 demos and show you what this looks like live. So we're going to dive into market expansion or consolidation, risk management, service personalization, compliance assessment, and asset valuation. So without further ado, for the first 3 of these, I'm going to hand over to Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you, Helen. So first one we're going to talk about is market consolidation and expansion. So kind of 3 different examples we commonly see with our customers. The first one is trying to identify underserved regions with high opportunities for growth. And so ultimately, how do you find regions where you can efficiently target your products and services? The second one is you have a portfolio of assets, so stores or banks or some sorts of facilities, and how do you optimize those locations? Potentially look for consolidating assets based on things like customer dynamics, with the ultimate goal of efficient optimization, improving customer acquisition, and maintaining existing customers. And the third example we commonly see is kind of expanding operations while trying to minimize risk. So looking at things like existing customers, local economic resilience, and incorporating those sorts of data sets and processes into your analysis to ultimately expand in while minimizing risk. Sorry about that. All right, so let's go into our first demo. And so what you're looking at here is a map of this is our builder map. So basically, this is our out-of-the-box mapping solution through CARTO. And what you see on the map are about 5,000 banks. So in this particular use case, we have 5,000 banks across the US, and we are looking at means to try to identify ones that would, banks which should undergo a process of reviewing for consolidation purposes. And so what we've got on the map are blue and red dots. The blue dots um, are locations where the banks do not meet our criteria. So we've got kind of three sets of criteria in this example, where we're looking at the population within a 5 mile radius of a particular bank location. We're looking at the average age within that same 5 mile radius. And then we're comparing each location of these banks with each other to try to reduce redundancy from a spatial location standpoint. So really looking at the distance between banks in our portfolio. So the blue dots are ones that do not meet our criteria. And then the red dots meet one of the three different, or sorry, all three of the different criteria that we've specified, and ultimately should undergo some sort of review in this particular use case. On the right, we have a series of widgets that allow you to filter the maps based on the information that you're seeing in the widgets, allow you to kind of easily access the types of information that you're wanting to see. And so what we can see if we zoom in is kind of this spatial relationship between the different banks in this particular case. And so we can kind of see for a particular location how many banks are within that specified distance that we've identified in our criteria. And what we have included in here is the ability to expose these parameters to decision makers to allow them to kind of manipulate the criteria to adjust the thresholds. And then ultimately, when those parameters get modified, the data on the map will update. So as I reduce the criteria that's acceptable, the number of banks would decrease, and subsequently we had banks that didn't meet the threshold before that do after I've adjusted these different parameters. So in this use case, we've got these three different parameters, but we commonly see customers incorporating things like growth data sets as far as where are locations of rapid growth, maybe foot traffic data where we have active customers. Those types of data or any other type of data set can be incorporated in this type of process that ultimately help you make educated and informed decisions around your existing customer base and assets. Helen, anything you'd like to add before I leave this demo?
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. I think just something I often think, like I come from a background where I would be the data analyst in this example, I suppose. And I always think there can be a real gap between what the data analyst knows and what the decision makers in a company know, and being able to put that sort of decision-making ability in the decision maker's hand where they can decide what the appropriate criteria are can just save so much back and forth and so much time between those two roles in your organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. All right, so let's move on to our second use case. And this one is really looking at kind of risk management. And some of the examples that we see are utilizing spatial phenomena like flood risks or fire risks or neighborhood economic risks to produce more accurate pricing for underwriting within underwriting models. Another example that we see is fraud detection, incorporating geospatial anomalies. So you may have two credit card transactions that appear very close in time, but obviously are maybe geographic diverse, and subsequently could trigger some sort of notification investigation around those particular activities. The third example we commonly see is mapping a climate and disaster exposure to manage portfolio risk. So National Weather Service releases a hurricane track, bringing those data in, comparing those with your business data to look at, well, what are the impacts of that particular storm track on our portfolio. So as I jump into the second demo here, um, this particular use case is looking at our business data. We're an insurance company. We have about 80,000 assets. And what we're doing is we're bringing in open data from the city of New York around crime rates. So we're looking at property crimes and say, trying to correlate those with our asset data to say, okay, well, what portion of our portfolio is at increased risk to property crimes based on these open data sets that are available to us. And so what we have here are the areas in red, which are the assets that are in these higher risk areas, where the assets in blue are not, or outside of those areas. And similar to the other map, you have the ability to filter out, interact with these widgets. You can look at kind of the different distributions around different neighborhood boundaries or borough boundaries. Um, in this particular use case, this demonstration, I have two different types of assets, property and vehicles. If we only wanted to focus on property assets, we can filter the vehicle assets out and then just see the results of our portfolio impacted on the property assets. Zooming in, we get kind of down to the asset level where we have the individual locations, and the size of the point on the map correlates to the value of the asset. So if we look at a particular point on the map, we can click on it, get its asset ID, its type obviously is property, and its insured value, and whether it's inside or outside that high risk area. So some of the use cases around this was certainly machine learning models can be incorporated in these sorts of processes, where you can start to do predictive analytics, pricing, claims predictions, other types of analysis on top of these spatial phenomena that ultimately can drive value for your business. Helen, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you caught it all brilliant there. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem at all. All right, and then the third example that I'm going to or move through is service personalization. So basically, how do you deliver local offers and products based on user behavior in geographic context? So how do you increase engagement, conversion, and ultimately target products and services to particular geographically mapped market segments? The second is around enhanced customer experience with location-based features, things like travel-based insurance, currency auto switching, ultimately with the goal of building loyalty and customer retention. And for this particular demo, we're going to focus on another banking use case where we've taken census data and financial information and mapped it to a portfolio of banking products. And so these banking products are things like youth savings accounts or first-time buyer mortgages, retirement investment accounts, etc., which ultimately can then be mapped based on their characteristics, their market target segments, to the geographic targets that are on the map. And what that leads to is the ability to say, okay, these particular neighborhoods, regions, etc., would be best suited for these types of products. And so in this particular example, we have a more rural area that may be best suited for the digital first package in this scenario that we've demonstrated here. We go back to our widget-based view, we can filter out certain geographies, and obviously behind all of these areas are addresses. So if you start thinking about market outreach, mailers, which types of products do we target to specific groups of customers, you can certainly extract those types of information from these areas that you're seeing on the map here. Another interesting aspect to this is if we zoom into the Boston metro area, you start to think about in-store activities or in-bank activities in this particular case, and the types of services that we want to promote, and importantly, the types of educational activities that how we educate our staff in the particular location. Basically, what we've done here is around each bank location, we looked at a 10-minute drive time duration and say, okay, well, what are these particular market segments that maybe we should target in these particular locations? So it allows you to kind of customize the messaging and the training around different locations based on those surrounding areas and ultimately the products that may be of most interest to the adjacent communities. And then with that, Helen, unless there's anything else that you would like to add around this particular demo.
I think the
um,
only thing I would add, sorry, I think the only thing I would add for this demo is what we're showing you guys here today is frankly maps, mostly because maps are very visual and we all love maps and exploring them, and they're a great way of sort of getting the point across. But actually, your output for this kind of analysis, when you're doing spatial analysis, it doesn't necessarily have to be a map. You could be connecting this to your, say, your customer management system, and you could be using this to sort of organize how you send out communications to your customers. You could really be productionizing it. Location intelligence doesn't always have to end in a map. There's brilliant ways that you can add it into your sort of wider organizational processes.
Yep, great point. Yeah, there's a
Great.
database behind the scenes that these data are connected to, and ultimately allow you to produce products that are not necessarily map-based, but ultimately drive business value for you.
Exactly. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that later. But for now, shall I drive? Shall I take
Yep,
over? Okay,
absolutely.
I'm sure this will go really, really seamlessly. If you can just stop sharing your screen, please,
Yep,
Ryan.
there we go.
Perfect. Over to me. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen, Ryan.
Yes, correct.
Wonderful. Okay, so next we've got two more sort of financial services use cases and demos to get through. So next up, we have compliance assessment. I spoke a little bit about this earlier. So this could mean lots of different things for your organization, depending on what it is you do. This could mean managing ESG, so environment, social good risks, and regulatory risk exposure to meet disclosure mandates. And actually, that's the demo I'm going to show you in a second. This could mean enabling auditable and site-specific reporting, so making sure that your operations are transparent and making sure that actually your compliance assessment is really frictionless and really seamless. I know that compliance reporting can often be one of the more painful parts of working in financial services, and actually using location to sort of tie these things together and come up with a more seamless process for doing the analysis can actually really help. And then thirdly, location intelligence can be really helpful in terms of identifying service gaps in marginalized regions. So for example, say you were a bank and you had obligations to maybe serve deprived areas or rural areas like Ryan was showing you earlier. This is a great way of making sure that you can actually do that. So that's a bit of an overview of how you can use location intelligence for compliance assessments. Let me switch over to what that could look like in action. Hopefully, Ryan, can you confirm you've seen my screen change to a map?
Yep, you're good.
Wonderful. Great. So let's imagine for a second that we are working for an investment portfolio, and we're trying to decide which of two companies to basically invest in. They're two companies which are heavily engaged in their operations in palm oil extraction, essentially. And what we want to do is just make sure that our backs are covered, that we are not funding an operation that could be doing something that is breaking any laws, that is going to make us look bad because it's contributing to deforestation. So that's exactly what we're doing here. So we have two companies that we're sort of comparing and contrasting. We have company A and company B. Company A is the purple dots on the map, and company B is the green dots on the map. And this is their sort of global footprint in terms of palm oil production. So there's two ways that we could assess which is the least risky of these two companies. First of all, we can think about where are these locations in palm oil concession areas. So if a palm oil production location is in a palm oil concession area, that means it's kind of okay because that sort of palm oil farming has been mandated as being okay by the government. So what we can do here is use these widgets like Ryan was doing earlier, and we want to only look at assets that are not in palm oil concession areas. So these are ones that could be potentially risky. So let's filter to no, and let's zoom in to Malaysia, because we can see there's quite a few here. And we can see here we've got this site here, company A, that isn't in a palm oil concession area. If it were in a palm oil concession area, when we were to zoom in, we should be able to see the palm oil concession areas here, which are these white areas. So we can see, let's just zoom out to look at our global footprint again. Looking at those palm oil concession areas, locations that aren't in a palm oil concession, we can see for companies A and B, it's actually about even. There's not much in it. So we need to dig into this problem a little bit more deeply and look at deforestation. So now we can look at forest loss by company, and we can actually see that in terms of kilometre squares, company A has had far greater forest loss in the sites that it is operating. So that could potentially end up reflecting very badly on us as a company if we were to invest in company A, as they're sort of contributing quite badly to deforestation. We can go ahead and look at which individual sites are particularly causing a problem. So we can see site 34 here. If we zoom in, we can see that even though this is in a palm oil concession area, since 2020, there's been almost 364 kilometre square of forest loss. And actually, all of this analysis has been done using Google Earth Engine. At CARTO, we have loads of really fantastic external integrations. So if you want to extract data from external sources like Google Earth Engine, it's really, really easy to do that. And we actually did a webinar on how you can do that a couple of months ago, if you're interested in looking that up. So that's one way of showing how you can really quickly make decisions based on compliance and ESG. So let's just head back into one final use case before we start to wrap things up. So the final thing that I want to talk about today is asset valuation. So how you can use location intelligence to basically work out what value your assets are, if there's any risks within those values, if there's any chances for potential investment. So there's lots of different sort of facets to this. So first of all, you can use location intelligence to incorporate local, environmental, and social factors into your valuation models. So bring in things like deprivation, crime, air quality, all sorts of different factors to look at the value of your assets. You can also track property development in real time, so actually see what is happening on the ground rather than being doing your analysis based on outdated information. And you can also assess neighborhood level economic trends, so you can adjust your outlook and your portfolio predictions dynamically and predict in real time what's happening in the future. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you now, if my escape button wants to work. So the final demo of today before we start to wrap things up here is looking at property price trends in England and Wales. So I want you to imagine again that we are working for a bank looking at mortgage investments and working out where we actually want to offer mortgages to different customers. So this map is showing us something that I actually think is really, really interesting. So at CARTO, something I'll talk about in a second, one of the parts of our platform is called our Analytics Toolbox, which basically offers loads of different functions to allow you to turn your spatial data into sort of more actionable layers and things that you can actually make decisions from. And this, we offer our customers a lot of sort of quite advanced, sophisticated data science tools, and that's what this analysis is based on. So this is looking at clusters of property price trends and across, I believe it was 2022 to 2024. And you can see hopefully here that there are 4 colors on this map, which represent 4 different types of clusters. So first of all, we have the high cluster, which is areas where all the properties have high prices and all of the surrounding areas also have high prices. So no surprises if we zoom into central London, full of high clusters, and these represent those areas. At the other end of the scale, we have low clusters. So these are the green areas on the map. If we go more towards the north of England or more rural areas, we'll see these areas with low property prices. And all of the surrounding areas around here are also low property prices. So it's quite a sort of solid trend in terms of property prices. What I'm actually really interested in showing you today is not the high clusters and not the low clusters, but the low-high and high-low clusters. So these are slightly different. So the low-high clusters, if we zoom into ones here, we can see in East London, These are areas of generally high prices in the area. So in London, we know the property prices are very high, but these specific pockets are actually very low prices. So these represent potential really good opportunities for investment because there's kind of a ceiling, a room for us to grow in terms of the property prices. So those are sort of the positive side of the story. The sort of purple areas here are the opposite of that, high-low properties. Let's see which ones could be useful to look at. Let's go to Bristol, my hometown. So in Bristol, or in general, these high-low areas are areas where generally the property prices are quite high. So these parts of Bristol, for example, are very affluent. Actually, no, sorry, this is the reverse. So these are actually areas where, in general, the property prices are quite low. But in these locations, these specific locations, the properties are very high compared to their sort of neighborhood. And that could represent a few things. That could represent that maybe it's just the city centre and that's what happens in the city centre. But it could also mean the market is slightly more volatile in those areas, or it could mean that properties are actually overvalued in those areas and there's actually chance for the market to autocorrect, not autocorrect, sorry, what's the word, maybe it is autocorrect, to correct itself so that actually those property prices might end up decreasing. So if we were to invest in real estate in those areas, it's actually more risky for our properties. So that's what is sort of the previous picture. That's what's been happening in the last couple of years. What we can actually do now is see how that reflects on what's happening currently. So this is all of that data and all of that analysis that I just showed you sort of appended to the current picture and current potential mortgages that we're looking at offering. And we can use that information to decide where do we actually want to offer those mortgages, where do we want to invest in property, and where is it more of a risk and where we actually don't want to. And the way that we're going to do that, we're going to do that slightly differently. And as a live demo, this is slightly more risky than filtering widgets. So do bear with me. We're going to use AI. So if you're someone who is a CARTO user, you might have got to try this already. It's one of my favorite things. In CARTO now, you can now add, you can see here, CARTO AI agents to your maps. And these can help you with basically your decision making. You can basically talk to your map, do some prompt engineering with natural language and get insights from your data without having to do any analysis yourself, without having to build widgets like this. You can just do the analysis yourself. So let's ask this to show me, and this is where actually my typos will be probably my worst enemy in this. Show me properties. Let's say, show me potential assets. Show me potential assets which are a high opportunity for investment. So hopefully this will have a look through all of the data that I have on the map and come back and show me those assets that are in those locations I spoke about earlier, where there is a real potential for growth in the value of those properties. So you can see it's going through, looking through my widgets, it's filtering the widgets, seeing what information is available to it. And you can see this is all happening on the map as well. And this is really helpful if you are sharing your map with someone who is not necessarily super data literate, maybe struggles with dashboards a little bit, because they can just ask questions to the AI agent. They don't have to worry about filtering all of this. But you can see here, that's gone through and that's done exactly what I wanted. It's found all of my potential assets that are in low-high areas. And these are locations where there's that room for growth that we spoke about. And we can now go in and look at each of these and find out what's going on and make a decision and maybe productionize this and take this data and build it into a wider model for that sort of investment decision making. So, Ryan, anything you'd like to add before I head on to the next portion of this talk?
One thing I would add is a lot of the security-focused people will ask, well, wait a minute, is my data getting shared with these AI models? And so the way that this is constructed is the contextual information is basically the information from the widgets, as Helen had mentioned, and information on the map. And the AI agents are your machine learning models that are embedded in your data warehouse. So those data never leave your data warehouse.
Yes, perfect. Thank you for adding that in. Okay, great. So let's move on from the demo portion. I hope there was something there that you found interesting. Maybe there's something you looked at and were like, oh, I'd love to learn how to do that. Well, hopefully this is where I'm going to tell you how. So at CARTO, we always say this: everything happens somewhere. It's actually estimated that about 80% of all data collected has a location component. But we actually estimate that the vast majority of companies actually aren't taking advantage of this, and that is as true for financial services as anyone. So why is that? Well, there's a few challenges that organizations face when working with data in financial services. Maybe some of this is going to ring true with some of you. So first of all, data integration. So it can be really hard to actually find the data that you need to do your analysis and solve your problems. And actually, even once you've found it, it can be really hard unifying that and bringing that into one common space. This is often due to proprietary formats, so data being in a very sort of specific format, maybe because it was produced by a certain provider or software platform. And actually, organizations can spend a lot of their time ETLing or export transform loading their data so they can bring it into that unified space. And by the time they've done all of that, there's actually not much time left for data analytics and decision making. So that's data integration. Next, we have analysis barriers. So this relates to actually doing the analysis, some of the struggles that people have there. So some of this is to do with legacy tools lacking advanced capabilities. So I mentioned earlier that at CARTO, we have a lot of quite advanced data science algorithms and tools available. And sometimes you really need that level of advanced tools to make decisions in financial services because there's so many different facets and elements to what you're trying to do. And sometimes those advanced tools just don't exist. Also, often in financial services, you're working with really, really massive data. And this is particularly true if you're trying to scale decision making and maybe make decisions for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of data points all in one go rather than one at a time. So if that data is very cumbersome to work with, you can really slow your time to decision making. And then finally, frequent data changes can really disrupt workflows. So I imagine this is something that a few people on the call have had pains with, where you feel like you've got all of your data into one place, you've run all of your analysis, you've created your dashboard or your map, and then you get a call from someone on your team and they say, no, that data's out of date, it's completely changed now, the data's completely different now, and you have to go back and do it all again. So it's really important to have a sort of element of flexibility in your workflows when you're dealing with those sorts of challenges. And then finally, skills bottlenecks. So sometimes it can be really challenging something that Ryan and I were trying to show you earlier was the importance of self-service analytics and how it's really great if you can put a lot of sort of data and analytics at the fingertips of your decision makers, but sometimes that just isn't possible for various reasons. Maybe it's your tools needing more sort of sophisticated and specialized skills. Maybe it's that the tools don't facilitate data being delivered in a sort of actionable format. Like I was saying earlier, like quite often dashboards might end up just being a map, and that's not always the most helpful thing. It's much more helpful if you can integrate that into your wider workflow. So those are some of the reasons that we think people in financial services aren't necessarily taking advantage of location intelligence. And actually, the costs of these challenges are really high. So it's estimated that for every analyst working in financial services, they end up wasting about 34% of their time, or about 21 hours a week, on those challenges I was talking about, on unifying their data, on making sure it's in the right format, on those sort of cumbersome, inflexible workflows. That amounts to about $60,000 each year of analyst time. That means that the organizations can really struggle with growth. So it's about 95% of banking executives say that those legacy systems are really inhibiting growth for their organizations. And finally, that all sort of goes together to say that these organizations are actually really lacking the insights. So because they can't bring data into the environment that they need, because they can't turn it into decisions, they're actually lacking the insights. So they're not actually being able to do anything with it. So that is something that at CARTO we are trying to help organizations change. So the sort of main reason that we see a lot of these challenges exist is all to do with data architecture. If you find data architecture really boring, please bear with me. I'll only talk about this for about a minute. So if you think about what data looks like in your organization, what the data ecosystem looks like, I think most of us, if we could do it in our ideal way, it would look something like this, where everyone working with data, whether they're working with spatial data, tabular data, document data, no matter what they're doing with it, they're all working in one sort of data ecosystem. All of their data is stored in the same place. All of their data is interoperable, so they can use it in all of the different software. All of the different software can talk to each other. It's all sort of one holistic, cohesive ecosystem. That's what I think we all want. However, I think what a lot of us have probably looks something a little bit more like this, which is actually there are more data silos in your organization than you would like, meaning that there are maybe certain teams that are sort of siloed away, their data stored somewhere else, they're working with a different tech stack, they're not sort of integrated with the wider data offering. And actually, it's really, really common that location data is a culprit here, um, primarily because a lot of people are using more legacy spatial data software and data storage solutions that don't play nicely with all of the sort of their main tech stack. So that's what we are trying to change at CARTO, is breaking that GIS data silo and bringing location analytics into your wider tech stack. The way that we do that primarily is by being fully cloud native. When I say being cloud native, what I really mean is that CARTO as a location intelligence platform is installed inside your cloud data warehouse. So all of the processing that you're doing, all of the maps that like you saw myself and Ryan building earlier, they are all created fully inside your cloud data warehouse. This has loads of advantages. Firstly, interoperability without compromising security. So your data never has to leave your cloud data warehouse. You never have to worry about the risks that come with those cumbersome exporting, transform, loading processes. But also you can be sure that your location intelligence is interoperable with all of your sort of wider processes and everything going on. This also means that you can really benefit from limitless scale and speed. So if you're working with massive amounts of data, you can still work with it incredibly quickly. You can still get those insights really quickly, and you can be a lot more flexible. So you can sort of, if you do have your colleagues coming to you saying, no, the data's changed, we need to start from the beginning, you can do that much more quickly and much more flexibly. And then finally, CARTO offers an end-to-end user-friendly collaborative platform that looks a little something like this. So what Ryan and I were showing you earlier was very much this section of the CARTO platform, the visualize, because that's the fun visual bit that works really well in a webinar. But there's actually a lot more to the CARTO platform, and we really aim to be a all-in-one platform for all of your geospatial needs, whatever your skill level. So you can manage your cloud-hosted data in CARTO, you can analyze the data using CARTO workflows, which is our low-code tool that you can see here. You can, as I showed you very bravely, I must say earlier, you can talk to your maps using our AI functionality. And also, if you're looking to do something a little bit more custom, you can also develop custom applications with CARTO as well. So if any of this looks like it's of interest to you, you can head to our website, carto.com, and sign up for a free 14-day trial and try out anything here that you fancy. Everything is included in the trial. And you can also head to our academy, which has lots of tutorials and many tutorials focused on financial services to help you sort of kickstart your journey. So I believe that is everything from us. Any closing thoughts from yourself, Ryan, while I see if we've got any questions?
No, it's nothing from me. Thank you.
Great. Okay, let's see then. Moderator, shoot over if we have any questions. Fantastic. From anonymous attendee. Hello, anonymous attendee. How do I learn about techniques for processing data to extract the types of insights you demonstrated? Ryan, do you fancy taking that one?
Yeah, so there's a number of different resources available. Obviously, the internet has a wealth of knowledge around that. Within CARTO, we have some template workflows that allow you to kind of get started quickly. So basically, these are kind of templates that take source data, where we have demo data sets that allow you to kind of transition those data into the types of products or visualizations that you saw here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love those workflow templates. They save me so much time. I don't believe we have anything else, but I'll just give it a second to see if we do. Oh, great. Here's one. Um, this is from Eric Schumann. Hi, Eric. Can you speak more to the custom developing piece of CARTO? I typically do a lot of back and forth between our current GIS software and Python. Brian, do you fancy
Yeah,
hitting that one off?
so we have any of the workflows that we talked about can be exposed through a REST API. So basically you build out the workflow that way it may have, multiple steps. You can expose that as an API endpoint, and those can be parameterized. So an example I like to use, if you have a particular workflow that requires a buffer distance that doesn't necessarily that's defined at runtime, you can expose that as a parameter, and that can be integrated into a Python script that basically can execute that workflow. The process runs, and then you can retrieve those results back. The other end of the spectrum is a full custom app that's leveraging deck.gl. We have a whole SDK that allows you to build out React or Angular or whatever framework you like to use on the UI side. That basically allows you to build out custom capabilities that target features for your particular use cases. And those are the two different extremes as far as an integration standpoint that allows us to expose the functionality of both CARTO and then the capabilities of your data warehouse programmatically.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another one. Does the data in the various cards come from a single table, or have you also made links between several tables, particularly at widget level? So the answer is it depends. So when you add a layer to a map in CARTO Builder, you can add it either as a table directly from your data warehouse, and that's just kind of the table in its standard form, or you can actually do in-app SQL query, and you can join various tables just as you would and do all sorts of querying just as you would with SQL. And the way that comes through to the widgets is it's a sort of per layer widget, but you can also enable cross filtering between layers as well. Anything
Yeah.
you'd add to that, Ryan?
Yeah, a good example was the criteria demo that I demonstrated, where basically those sliders parameterize a SQL statement that'll then get executed against your data warehouse and update the data on the map. So basically, that's kind of how the flow of information translates between the filters and the data and the map within the Builder application.
Nice. And then I think we have one more in here before I will let everyone go and enjoy their afternoons, which is another from anonymous attendee. I have lots of problems with my data being too big, and it's making my analysis slow and my maps very slow to draw. What techniques do you advise here? There's all sorts of ways that you can try and sort of scale your maps and your analysis. One of the great things about CARTO, just to give it another plug, is because we are cloud native, you kind of have scalability built in. And actually, one of the things that we do in our mapping technology is we have a technology called dynamic tiling, which you don't have to do anything with. It all happens on our side, but that basically turns your layers into tiles on the fly. And that means that you can render absolutely enormous maps. I think the biggest map I've ever seen made with CARTO had about 2 billion points on it. So absolutely huge. So actually with CARTO, a lot of the scalability is built in, but you can still take that much further. You can create your own tile sets, so sort of pre-rendered chunks of your data that can be viewed on a map, which makes things very fast. You can translate your data to something called a spatial index, which you may have seen on a few of our demos, which are basically global grid systems where location is encoded through a short ID rather than a long geometry, which makes them really, really lightweight. And you may have seen that on some of our demos where we had those hexagon grids. That's a really great way of sort of taking your data to a huge, huge scale because you're not reliant on those cumbersome geometries. So spatial indexes are one of my, you might be able to tell, all-time favorite data formats, and they will just change your life if you're working with massive data. Any additions to that, Ryan?
Yeah, the other piece I would add is the data warehouses are designed to scale. So they've all implemented their own capabilities to allow them to process massive amounts of both tabular and then also geospatial data. So really the data warehouses are your friend with respect to that.
What a great line to close on. Thank you all so much for coming along to our webinar. I hope you found something interesting and educational, maybe something you might want to try it yourselves. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to reach out to myself and Ryan on LinkedIn. Otherwise, thank you again for coming and have a great rest of your day. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.